Fear is a fundamental part of being human. You have to understand fear and insecurity and anxiety in order to understand basic psychology and to understand the gospel and this week's Come Follow Me material. One of the key verses is, "For God hath not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind." So these things are in opposition, right? Fear versus power, love, and a sound mind. When I saw this, I immediately thought about an article I wrote a long time ago, 7 years ago. I realized that insecurity is a universal trait among people. And I heard a couple weeks ago in church that somebody was saying, I think most people, everyone is insecure, or at least most people are insecure. And I was like, yeah, everybody is. It's kind of weird that that people don't really realize this. But it's kind of a basic part of reality for humans. We're all vulnerable. We all have danger. Like there's always some way that we could be harmed, and it's just part of life. We all know we're going to die someday, and so at least subconsciously, we're always thinking about this. And it's such an unpleasant thing that I think some people might not even be conscious how insecure they really are, how much it's motivating them and driving their decisions and their entire worldview. It's kind of interesting. It's one of these things where once you see it, like everything in the world makes a lot more sense. I think most people, they go through a couple stages of maturity. The first one is realizing, most people aren't paying attention to them. For some reason, when you're a kid, you just think that everyone is looking at you all the time or paying attention to what you're doing and maybe criticizing or something like that. But people you're just another person. So, the first thing is to not really worry. It's like the nobody cares meme. This guy, he's like all self-conscious and then he's like, "Hey everybody, it's what's his face?" And he's like, "See, nobody cares." Anyway, then there's a second realization that everybody has, hopefully, at some point. And that is that everybody else is self-conscious. And it's kind of crazy. I don't know why it takes so long to realize this. I don't know why it took me so long. I read a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People, a very famous book. Highly recommend it. But I read it a long time ago, 13, 14 years ago, and it touches on this concept a lot, but I still didn't really absorb it because it took me so much longer. It took me 7 years after that. So, 7 years ago from now, for me to realize that no, everybody is so insecure. It's unbelievable how insecure everybody is. The scripture says, "God hath not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind." So at some point we have to be able to overcome our insecurity with the gospel. So that's what I'm going to talk about a little bit today. I'll start with a story of how I realized that everyone was insecure. I didn't really try to date very much until about 7 or 8 years ago. And it took me a while to get the hang of it. And there was a girl that I liked a lot. It was kind of crazy. She's the girl I liked the most, I think. And I remember sitting and like seeing her, and she gave a talk in church, and but even before she started speaking, I saw her, and she wasn't like a model, but there was something about her that just was super attractive to me, like incredibly attractive. And it took a while, but eventually I asked her out. She actually approached me and talked to me at least a couple times, and then I was like, I should really ask her out. And so I did, and I thought she was pretty interested in me. And then suddenly she's like not interested in me anymore. And so I was thinking, what did I do wrong? And I was thinking and thinking and thinking, and I thought I realized a ton of epiphanies basically, and everything was making sense. But then I realized it's embarrassing to say that I didn't realize this back then, but I realized that she was insecure. And that was actually an issue. I know that there are stupid things that I did, but that's kind of part of what happens, because I've learned that a lot of the reasons relationships never form or don't last is because of fear of rejection. Not actual rejection, but fear of rejection. And I was thinking, like, wait, could this have been part of it? And then suddenly I started seeing all these signs, like how did I not see this before? She like was self-conscious about how she hated she hated exercising. She wasn't good at math. Like, she was telling me all these things about things she wasn't good at, and I was just so focused on myself that I forgot to pay attention and understand that she's a person too. And yeah, so I was like super naive. And once I realized, oh my gosh, I think she's insecure, it becomes really easy to understand everything, because like there are a lot of problems with me. There are legitimate things that I realized that I could improve, and ultimately, if it was supposed to happen, it would have happened. But I also want to improve, and so I came up with a big list. But I think a big problem was insecurity, obviously on my part, because I was so focused on myself, but on her part as well. And everybody's insecure, and it gets in the way of all kinds of nice things. So, but what happens is you start to be concerned. I don't know if you're single, you pay attention to this, but every once in a while you'll see somebody as unattractive, not because of anything about them or something they've done, but about something you think they will do, because they remind you of somebody who did that thing, or like, it's a very subtle thing, but you'll start to reject yourself in advance when you look at somebody and you think maybe they're like out of your league or something. You'll just reject yourself automatically. There are other signs that somebody might act negatively towards you, so it's not always that you think that they're better than you, but that's a common case. But anyway, so yeah, I just went down a rabbit hole. I was like, wow, this is a thing. And I learned that insecurity undermines everything, pretty much. Like, all problems, all human behavioral problems have some relationship to insecurity, and like even subconscious, and even like really, really subconscious, like at the biological level, as far as like mating strategy. And anyway, so that's another topic for another day. But yeah, so I started studying it. I looked at a ton of scriptures and talks about fear, and especially like shame and social judgment. And then the talk that I think had the most impact was President Benson's talk on pride, because I've read that several times and I never connected it to insecurity. But it's clear that proud people, they're covering up something. They're afraid of other people. And so they're competing against them, and they're antagonistic, and they're trying to defeat other people. It's a zero-sum game, and it comes from insecurity. Yeah, here, this particular phrase: the proud depend upon the world to tell them whether they have value or not. Their self-esteem is determined by where they are judged to be on the ladders of worldly success. They feel worthwhile as individuals if the numbers beneath them in achievement, talent, beauty, or intellect are large enough. Pride is ugly. It says, if you succeed, I am a failure. So I realized, though, that insecurity, everyone is born with it. And it's kind of like the story of Adam and Eve. When they're in the garden, they eat the fruit and they realize they're naked. what they're realizing is that they're vulnerable, and they realize. Jordan Peterson says that at that time they also realize that other people are vulnerable, the other person, and so what can hurt them can hurt other people, and so that's kind of where they have a knowledge of sin at that point was when they realized that they were vulnerable and so are other people. And I just had a random thought: what if in the Garden of Eden, death was a thing, but knowledge of death is what was missing? I don't know, that's an idea that I have not thought through at all. So maybe I'll think about that later and mention it in the next video, if there's any worth to it, if there's any possible way of reading the story that way. Anyway, so so we realize we are vulnerable, and then it starts to settle into our minds, and we start to have suspicions and fears and self-consciousness. But then we have a couple of paths we can take. One path is kind of short term. It's like the fear is so gripping that I have to do something to stop, something to feel safe right now. And that's like money, worldly things in general. And the other side is realizing that you're fundamentally powerless, and accepting that everything is in God's hands, and having faith in God. For God hath given us this. God hath not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. So I thought, pride is a universal sin. Then insecurity is a universal weakness or vulnerability or state that we're in, insufficient state. And like the root of all evil, how does that connect to it? Because if something's universal, then the root of all evil seems to be connected. So the love of money is the root of all evil. Money kind of encapsulates all the worldly ways to assuage insecurity. So the love of money is the belief that a worldly solution could ever work. So the love of money would be the universal lie, basically, that each of us accepts when we're sinning. And so you have the universal weakness, insecurity, and then you have two paths: God or money, and or things that money can buy, and then when you believe, when you take on that belief that money is something you should love, that leads to pride and all the things in that talk from President Benson that you should go listen to again or read again. It's such a good talk, and it explains so much. So I realized after a while that the Book of Mormon, I was thinking like, okay, so at what point do we realize that the love of God is good enough, and we can trust in that and stop playing the short-term games and the zero-sum games, and partaking in the dog-eat-dog world, and just sort of look to the have an eternal perspective and have peace. What can we do to get there? And I thought about Moroni's promise at the end of the Book of Mormon being the key to that. And it is the most powerful key we have today of having a testimony of Christ. And I always wondered why it was phrased in this specific way, and I finally understood it. It says, "Behold, I would exhort you that when you shall read these things, if it be wisdom in God that you should read them, that you would remember how merciful the Lord hath been unto the children of men from the creation of Adam even down until the time that you shall receive these things and ponder it in your hearts." Ponder it in your hearts. these things. So, what are you pondering in your hearts? Not these things, not the book. It's because it's grammatical, okay? It's not saying when you receive these things and ponder them in your hearts. It says ponder it in your hearts. And the it is how merciful the Lord hath been. So you need to make way for the seed to grow, the seed of faith. And the making way part of that is pondering the mercy of God. So why mercy? When you go out into the world, nobody thinks they need mercy from God, right? They're like, for why? Like, they don't recognize that God is in charge. They don't recognize that they need mercy. So you have to realize, you just soak the things in, like the events in the scriptures, and ponder them from the perspective of how God is powerful and he loves you. Because that's really what mercy is. Somebody who has the power to be merciful. He's in a position of power, and he's merciful because he loves us. So think about that. Somebody who has all the power in the universe loves you. That should eliminate all fear. If somebody, like if your cat loves you, is that going to eliminate your fear of dying in a traffic accident? No, probably not. But if the most powerful being in the universe loves you, and he could stop that, but has chosen not to, then you trust in God that it will be okay in the end, that there's something better that will eclipse all the negativity you've ever experienced and all the pain and death that has ever happened on earth, that there's something after, there's something bigger, and this is a very small blip of time in the eternal scheme of things. So before you ask God if the Book of Mormon is true, or if he's really there, you make a place in your mind by ordering what you know, what you've heard, what you've read, and sorting it and aligning it all under one narrative. That during the entire time, God was in control. And repeatedly, he showed mercy. When people didn't deserve a second chance or third chance or fourth chance, he gave it to them. And it is miraculous, and that is the key to overcoming insecurity. God is all powerful and he loves you. And when you know that, you can bear any burden. And so suddenly you're not afraid, and you can focus on other people. You can focus on making the world a better place and doing God's work and what you're supposed to do. And back to 2 Timothy, the spirit of power is what God gives us, knowing that we are on the Lord's errand and that he's going to win because he's got all of the power. And the spirit of love, we receive it from God and we're able to give it to other people. Like when I was on my date, I could only think about myself, and I was afraid of how I was coming off, and I was unable to see and respond to her insecurities. And that was a hilarious but kind of tragic failing. Yeah. And having, so not the spirit of fear, but of power. So the spirit of power, the spirit of love, and the spirit of a sound mind. Yeah, so here's the thing. Elder Kim B. Clark, he said that the reason the testimony of Jesus is a spirit of prophecy is because Jesus gives us hope for the future. And rather than, you see this in people who are extremely insecure, but they're afraid to think about the future. They're like, I can't afford to think about the future right now. I have to take care of these things. I need to make some more money. I need to attain whatever worldly thing they're after. And they have no patience. They literally cannot sit and wait for something long-term to come because they're so urgently focused and they've made a routine, and it's just a part of the way they see the world that things have to happen now. And so they don't even realize how deep their insecurity might be. So so when you do have faith in an all-powerful God who's merciful to you, you start to naturally, and like Elder Kim B. Clark said, your mind is drawn in a natural way towards the future. And that's the spirit of prophecy. The testimony of Jesus gives you hope in the future. And so that's where your mind dwells more and more until you can see the future, basically, because you're thinking about it. You're learning, you're receiving inspiration, and you naturally become a prophet. So, yeah, a sound mind, having all the building blocks in place for you to be able to organize into a meaningful and serviceable concept of the universe and the world how it is now. That's a sound mind. Having the confidence and the calm and the peace that comes from having the right eternal perspective. And the next verse says, "Be not thou therefore ashamed of the testimony of our Lord." So you want all this, right? Like, this is a way to live where you're not in constant, it's not constant friction. Everything isn't stopping you all the time because everything is, you're okay. The future's fine. Things will be okay. So you shouldn't be ashamed of the testimony of the Lord. He gives you that power. He gives you the love that you can share with other people, and he gives you a sound mind. So only good things come from it. So don't be ashamed of it. It's not the spirit of shame. You should have the spirit of love, and you should not be angry when other people are disagreeing or don't understand something. You should be sad. That's the correct emotion. It's not shame or anger or the feeling of needing to justify yourself, to prove yourself, or I'm going to show them. It's just humbly accepting how things are, because they're going to be okay. No matter how things are, they will be okay. No matter what pain you have to go through on the way, it'll be worth it. And yeah, there's no reason at all to feel shame for that. So yeah, all right. That's my thought. I'm very focused on just those 2 verses, but it's such an important topic. So I encourage you to read that talk on pride again from President Benson, and yeah, have a great Sunday. And yeah, man, I love this. All right.